Hello everyone, I'm Vineeth Kashyap. Today I'll be talking about our work on developing a static analysis checker for detecting swapped argument errors in C and C++ applications. This is work done jointly with Roger Scott, Joe Ranieri, and Lucja at Grammatech. Our research was funded by the DHS Science and Technology Division. Let's jump right into it with a kill example. Here's a call to the kill function. This is a real code snippet from the Xwhile project, which is an editor application. In fact, all the code examples I'm going to show today are real-world examples, not written by us. All the examples in our paper are also real code snippets. If we take a look at the declaration of the kill function in signal.h, it takes the process ID as the first argument and the signal to kill the process with as the second argument. However, in the call site to kill, the developer has mistakenly swapped the order of these arguments, passing the signal first and then the process ID. Now, it can be quite challenging to catch these kinds of errors using traditional static analysis techniques. And they don't, because it can be quite hard to capture the specification for the correct behavior here. Types can be helpful sometimes, but not always. For example, when the arguments are type compatible, as in this example, one can still have uncaught errors. Programmers don't create names for variables and macros completely randomly all the time. They're sometimes rational and use names to communicate the high-level semantics of data in the program. Traditional static analysis tools based on data flow analysis or abstract interpretation usually ignore the name information. Our central thesis is that name information can be exploited by static analysis checkers to find errors like the one that I just showed you. When reasoning about names, one thing to keep in mind is that programmers are endlessly creative about names, where they can take various terms and then string them together in different ways. One of the first things we do before analyzing names is split the names into morphemes, that is, their most basic meaningful unit. We split at camel cases and underscores, and we use an off-the-shelf splitter that splits names at frequent word boundaries. We split sig-kill into sig and kill because kill is a term that is frequently used in a large corpus all by itself. Similarly, cpid is split into c and pid. If we split names, the correspondence of swapped arguments becomes pretty clear. We have sig mapping to the second parameter and pid mapping to the first parameter. Another trick that we employ throughout our checker is to eliminate the morphemes that are common to the pair of names that we are considering. In this call site, for the two highlighted arguments, the morpheme remote is common, so it is eliminated. If we take a look at the declaration of this function, sequence appears before acknowledgement, and the swap becomes obvious because of the common morpheme elimination. Let me now talk about the key observations and insights that drive our checker. Associated with each of these insights is a stage of our checker, and we layer all of these stages together. The first observation is that argument names are usually similar to the parameter names. Based on this, we created the cover checker, which asks the question, how well are parameter morphemes covered by the argument morphemes in their current versus the swapped positions? Going back to our kill example, the parameter sig is covered or explained by the argument morphemes sig and kill. Note that there can be additional morphemes in the argument names like kill. In this case, the morphemes sig in the parameter and the argument are exactly the same, but in general, we define a similarity metric that takes abbreviations into account. Similarly, the parameter pid is covered by the morphemes pid and c. To take a more complex example, consider this call with the highlighted arguments. When you look at the declaration of this function, it has the parameters export and min length. Our checker identifies that there is a swap argument error here. Looking into the highlighted arguments in a bit more detail, the third argument, min contact mere length, is made up of morphemes min, length, and a bunch of others, and they cover all the morphemes in the fourth parameter named min length. Similarly, the fourth argument, flag export filter nodes, is made up of the morpheme export and a bunch of others, which cover the morphemes in parameter 3 export. Note that in their current positions, these arguments do not cover their parameters at all, which is why the cover-based checker finds the swap error. Going back to our observations, the second observation is that there are exceptions to the first observation. When you look at a large corpus of programs, if there are enough counterexamples to the swaps detected using our cover-based checker, then we conclude that it is likely an intentional swap was made by the developer following a local pattern. Otherwise, we would be reporting too many false positives. That is, we ask the question, is the detected swap not rare in a large corpus? We call this stage the statistical vetting stage. Taking a real-world example, here we have a call site with the highlighted arguments denominator and numerator. The corresponding declaration has numerator appearing before the denominator, so the cover-based checker would have detected a swap. However, when we look at a large corpus of programs, swaps like this for the GStreamer API function seem to be not rare. It looks like a shortcut pattern developers use for the reciprocal of the function, perhaps. Through the statistical vetting stage, we prune out this false positive. Another observation is that argument names follow certain naming patterns based on their positions for a given API function. This led us to create a stage called the statistical checker by looking at a large corpus of code. Here, we are asking the question, are argument names statistically more common in their swapped positions than their current position? As an example, consider this call site with the highlighted arguments error and event. The corresponding declaration lacks parameter names, but we still find a swapped argument error here based on statistical patterns. The morphemes error and event are much more common in their swapped positions than their current positions. Indeed, when we look at the comments and documentation, our swap detection was correct. After looking at lots of detected swaps in real-world code, another observation we had is that a lot of the swaps are intentional. And in general, it can be quite difficult to precisely say whether a swap is intentional or mistaken. However, driven by triage of real-world scenarios, we developed several heuristics to filter out false positives. In this stage, we ask the question, does the detected swap fit any of our false positive heuristics, which take the surrounding context of the call site into consideration? To look at one such heuristic, consider this example. In the declaration of the function, to code comes before from code. Later, the developer calls this function in the correct order, that is, to code comes before from code, immediately followed by a call in the swapped order where the from code comes before to code. It is a fairly common pattern to call a function in both the correct and the swapped order close by to each other. In such cases, we assume the developer probably knows what they're doing and filter out this detected swap as a false positive. In our paper, we go into lots of details of how we tie all of these stages together to create our swapped arguments checker. And I hope I've convinced you to go read our paper for these details. We evaluated our checker on over 417 million lines of open source C and C++ code. We then sampled a subset of all the errors that our checker found, and we manually triaged the subset and found that about 154 errors were actually true positives, with a true positive detection rate of 67% amongst the manually triaged errors. After submitting this paper, we also did a brief study of whether our checker was applicable to Python, a dynamically typed programming language. Here's the call in a popular NetworkX Python graph library. and the corresponding declaration, our checker actually detects a swap over here. I Googled this bug and found a Red Hat thread from March, just earlier this year. After a long discussion, it seems they are lost about what could be going on because the error manifests in an unexpected way. And eventually they figure out and diagnose that it is the swapped argument error that I just showed you. This shows that having a swapped argument error checker is very helpful. I wanted to end with a couple of questions to ponder. First, can we detect bad library API design? For example, if a lot of swapped argument errors are found in client code, or if there is inconsistency in naming within the same API, where one method has names in a certain order or another has in a different one. And secondly, can we combine traditional static analysis based on data flow analysis or abstract interpretation to also effectively make use of name information? Thank you very much.